But Joshua, the portal has been overshadowing the national semifinal games. First of all, I guess, what have you made of it? Like, we wanted to see how this was going to play out, right? We knew the portal would be open while there were 4 teams still playing. I mean, Indiana's cleaning up in the portal, so it doesn't seem to be too much of a problem for them. But what do you make of this overlap in general?
Well, I'll say the interesting thing for a team like Indiana, compared to Oregon, who they're getting ready to face, is like both of Oregon's coordinators are going to other jobs. So they're recruiting for other schools while they're still getting the game plan together. And so you hear some of these stories about how Will Stein's got guys on campus and they're watching tape until midnight. Like it's wild for them to try to do it. And Indiana's benefit is that all their guys are back. And so they can all just recruit business as usual while they're getting the game plan together. I was curious to see how crazy this portal might be because you don't have the spring portal anymore. And there are a lot of guys that are obviously like, this is my only time to move. I think even some big names that are like, well, if I'm going to test my market and I'm going to dip my toe in and I'm going to try to figure out how much money I can get because there are desperate teams out there, this would be the time to do it. So it's weird because we hear rumors about the NIL numbers we don't necessarily know, but I think a lot of the portal movement for some guys is driven off of this idea that they want to make sure that they are maximizing how much money they can get at every single point.
Totally true. And you're having a lot of the decisions impact each other's, right? Because we started to see the quarterback dominoes all start to fall one after each other on Sunday, which then obviously could drive up value for some or decrease for others. I mean, Sam Levitt is still out there and taking visits as we sit and record here. It's Tuesday, January 6th. At like 10 a.m. Eastern. So he may make a decision. But like you still have some of these big names that everyone's kind of waiting on, and that could impact other decisions as well. Let's run through some of the quarterbacks because I feel like that's where everyone is focused. One big decision to stay is Bryce Underwood staying at Michigan after the hire of Kyle Whittingham. That was a big one we were wondering about. Would he stick with the coaching change? So that's significant. There's been a decommit and a recommitment from a portal decision. Kenny Minchie, who was at Notre Dame last year, who pushed CJ Carr in that competition last year, commits to Nebraska and then less than 24 hours later flips it and is going to Kentucky with Will Stein. You mentioned the Oregon offensive coordinator. So we saw a flip already. Brandon Sorsby goes from Cincinnati to Texas Tech. That's the one where reportedly a lot of money exchanging hands there as well. And they put his picture up in Times Square. I mean, Texas Tech is ready to upgrade on the offensive side of the ball after what we saw to end their season. Josh Hoover goes from TCU to Indiana. And then you had a bunch of quarterbacks that followed their head coaches. So Rocco Beck goes with Matt Campbell to Penn State. Drew Mestemaker goes with Eric Morris to Oklahoma State. And then Byron Brown follows Alex Golish to Auburn. So we had a bunch that we were expecting that made a lot of sense following their coaches with eligibility. And then we saw some of these movements of, these are going to be the faces of these programs next year.
It's kind of insane. I'll start with the commit, decommit, flip in the portal. I feel like it's not something that we hear very often. It's super intriguing to me just to see that kind of thing happen because you hear players talk about being in the portal and how quickly they feel like they have to make decisions. And sometimes you wonder if guys do feel rushed or if they feel like, they're taking the number that they feel like is the best that's out there at the time, and maybe they miss an opportunity there. But then you also start to ask the question, like, do you trust Will Stein or do you trust Matt Rule a little bit more when it comes to quarterback development? So that was certainly interesting. The quarterback run was always going to be something to look at, though, because there were so many big names. And as we know, there are a lot of teams that are quarterback desperate. It almost feels like there are teams that have completely ignored the idea of developing a guy that they found from high school all the way through. And part of the reason why is you just can't count on guys to stay around anyway. So seeing that run, I think, is enlightening. And then finally, you talked about the guys who followed their coaches. And that's always one of the more interesting storylines now is when a guy gets a job, who is he going to bring along with him? Quarterback feels like an important one. The Penn State one for me, I thought was intriguing because the way I saw Ethan Grunkemeyer play toward the end of the year, it was, curious, like, do you keep him? Do you bring Rocco? But you got to bring the guy you trust. You got to bring the guy who knows your culture. You got to bring the guy who knows your system. And that's what a lot of these coaches are doing. It's almost like their quarterback is their extension when they're coming into the new job. to set the tone for what they want their culture to be like.
Well, and we just saw all of that work at Indiana, not at the
Mm-hmm.
quarterback position, but they brought over so many players and staffers. Like, I think that's what you're seeing North Texas to the Oklahoma State do, right? Like, they're going to try to do it like Indiana did with their foundation, just elevating those players up a level, and seeing if it can work and kind of speed run that like culture setting, which I think is really important and part of what got Indiana good so quickly. So all of that is super, super interesting. And I think, it's easy to get stuck in these 1-year rentals for quarterbacks because, you're not going to be able to pay a backup quarterback. You're not really going to be able to have depth at that position anyway. So you could just be, a Miami, an Indiana, somebody that's just able to go out there and look at the best candidates every single year. DJ Lagway is still out there taking some visits. There are some really intriguing names that we've been wondering, hey, with a different place, hopefully they're healthier, but just different coaching. Could they unlock something that is higher, that is closer to their higher end than what we have seen so far? A couple of non-quarterback notable notes. Oklahoma cleaned up. There was a lot of portal commitments on Monday this week. They're getting a lot of offensive players, different skill positions. Very interesting because obviously they need to upgrade that side of the ball as well. Hollywood Smothers, the star from NC State, running back, he's going to Alabama. They also needed to address that. They could not run the ball this year. So you're seeing people like really, use the portal to address those really pressing needs. And then Trey Wisner from Texas, the running back, goes to Florida State. So those were significant ones to me. Joshua, anyone else that's kind of caught your eye or any moves that are intriguing to you this week?
Well, I'll take a look at the Hollywood Smothers one, because I don't know if Alabama's issue with running the football was their running back room. And I know Jam Miller was banged up for a lot of the season. That offensive line is where I'm looking for Alabama and what they can do there to try to create some of those running lanes. So I think it solves part of an issue, but they still have some work to do. And then I think this idea of guys who are buried on depth charts really intrigues me too. And we talked about Kenny Minchie and his journey in the portal and the idea that he can become a really good player. Like, this is a guy who can, I think, elevate Kentucky in ways that maybe people don't anticipate because they haven't really seen him. Another guy that I think is intriguing is Lincoln Kienholz, who is a backup quarterback for Ohio State, going to Louisville. And we know Jeff Brom in terms of quarterbacks and like kind of finding guys who maybe are a little bit under the radar, might not be super developed, and they become really productive players in his system. So that second tier of guys who haven't played as much, aren't as big of names, buried on depth charts, those are intriguing players to me because I think they can hit you out of left field and have a phenomenal year.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Louisville one. I think that's going to be a really intriguing spot to watch this offseason. And he has multiple years, right? Multiple years of eligibility, which
Yes.
that's also huge. Jeff Brom to get a couple of years with a quarterback. I think that one's going to really, really work out well. So that has been overshadowing these national semifinal games. And these four teams have had to deal with it, right? We mentioned Josh Hoover going to Indiana, which I really like as his next quarterback for Kurt Cignetti in this offense. They added Nick Marsh, who was a receiver at Michigan State that maybe not everyone got to see because that offense was very anemic at times, but he is a stud. He's going to put up big numbers in that Indiana offense. So they have managed this very well, preparing for a semifinal game, but still having their personnel folks handle the roster for next year.